The History of the Poetry Project, edited by our amazing editorial director, Kay Gabriel. So please grab a copy. They're over there for sale for $10. Okay, I think that's it for announcements. I will now proceed to introduce our readers. And bless you. This is a very... I feel like this is a very, I love small, intimate readings, and also feel like this is an ESB reading, so we're celebrating also our ESB fellow Marc Solomon. Marc has been a regular at the Poetry Project. I think since I've started working here, I've never not seen Marc at a reading. So he is the official program director, I would say, here. And he is also an amazing community member. I remember at our first marathon, where, the marathon ends at like 2 a.m. Everyone's exhausted, crazy, incredible evening. And we still have to stack up the chairs and clean up. And who's there with us? Marc. So I really sort of, I'm just very, very sort of honored to have him here tonight as a reader and celebrate him, both as a community member and as an amazing poet. Okay, so Marc's mentor is Anne Boyer, and Anne is currently in Scotland and sent this little introduction that I'm gonna read for her. So, first, we find a word, and by that one, we find the next. And through those two, and all the way until the end of this thing we call a poem, we balance precision and unknowing. Some words arrive that aren't the words we needed. Some arrive that are. Sometimes we must wait for the necessary ones, caught in the thickets of the words that are not yet the ones we need. And even the words that we finally sense are the necessary ones, the ones that we patiently observed and recorded, come with their sorrows, their occlusions. And we do not attempt during any of this to obscure the sorrows or sorrowful words. But we also do not let these sad words become bitter. This is what I have had the privilege to learn about poetry from Marc Solomon so far in our conversations and reading of poetry. He is at once a newcomer to poetry and a person with long, patient practice of art. It shows in his poetry's carefulness and also in its room for mystery. His work has something else too. It surprises, it swerves, it deflates, it has its own compelling texture, humor, and song. There are so many terrible things that could befall a human over the course of their lives. They could become a landlord, an investment banker, a celebrity, even a president. How lucky I have been to get to work with Marc, who, whenever he could, in those rare hours in which we were free from labor, chose the greater path of drawing in the park. Please join me in welcoming Marc Solomon to the stage.
Thank you all for coming. And I think I'm just going to begin because there's no better introduction than that. Although I'll probably start with poems that Anne Boyer has looked over more carefully than some others. This first winter, snow off our urban river, running gray tonight, finds brusque tugboats at sway-back hours, crossing glances between dauntless cliffs. Two tugs hang back, notched to barges, awaiting radioed calls to lift anchor. But for lights, no one near would know whose vessels were there, anchored from drift, awaiting orders to get underway. Which wind tugs the Hudson to wrestle northward this late hour, turgid, bold, unhesitatingly lighted, against dire weather. Through crew quarter windows, each severe hand winters separate against anterior weather. Below deck, inside welded bulkheads, who can decide which voices hold sway without more second thought among sailors than set tides? Outline. Where did you go, shuddering light, as moment rendered reticle, tumbling into dreamlit sleep, where sight reserves a silent strand which dice reneges before others sink into solitary reappraisals of what to concede, vis-a-vis the compulsive sharing of thin secrets? Why are you looking at me from the depths of your solemnity, already disappointed with the suddenness of care? Who could find a humbler life hidden from daylight or the indistinct code a floor walker applies instead of dross when consumers take pillows for freedom? Oh no, not those odd abstractions where shadows inhabit as much valor as they can pay for in a raking world. Why not go back to sleep where pillows stand in for whatever vendors strive to make of after hours? Have you already started preaching out of the midst of your ancient bedclothes? Or will you contribute a certain nightlit confusion to the withholding of dreams? Surely reverie's not relentlessly bad for midnight, except around 23 minutes after daybreak. What did we mean to say last night? Will either of us remember, even today, our stillborn ties? How disappointing not to forget what each of us meant to get over. And who exactly are we, hollowed by pennies, reflecting on brine? A shame shows our currencies stand revoked, too often troubled for collecting strays. Why stop here to recollect what we've now overturned? The same arid questions persist, even while witnesses reenact claims arisen from our readily consumable pasts. Why entangle the harbingers of a repining species? Why not single out an uncommon impudence, tentative to leave unconvinced outsiders beloved among lanterns? What do our queries amount to against tales of intrepid interlopers, far traveled despite rough passages, bargained and battered against this equanimity of bystanders? Who are we homebodies to stand against the circumnavigation of skies above compunction, awakening simply to the discomfort of muteness and to have done with further complication? And this night recollects a stubborn voice at ones and nines with hesitation, a foreign species for not knowing what comes next. Try one word or a handful, spring them on an unbidden dream to tear apart by returning to wonder what made you shy away from gainsaying the unpredictable. Wouldn't the promise have held its round if you had not worried a much receded dream to awaken? Must windows pose questions unanswerable under skies aching for singularity? A blush of cloud loiters under rumors of weather pending distemper. Visitors wander beneath an awakening sky, soundless except for reeds, shadows, cranes, a river at tide of recollection. Where were we when we started? Where are we now, marking time as if we had forever to comfort? When will outsiders make up their minds about starlings, to curse against the luxury of rumors, Daylit tartness, earmarked for dementia. Mustn't gyrations hold their own attention, if nothing sooner? Isn't this you speaking through visitors, soon to turn into what they have made of themselves? Rugs, puddles, ploys. How often can we scrape these circles dry of wondering figures? Who are you anyway, hinting at emergencies, lacking sirens? What about those windows and tinnitus, squandering noise just to plug a hole? How far can you get on charm alone? Isn't this better, open and shut, into your only ridicule? You're no longer tied to anyone's past but your own, if that's the way to say it on stage. 1:41 a.m., Friday morning, half a night home. Will it keep? What about what comes next? What? Don't plead self-consciousness now. It's like riding back after that day at the lake. Narrative, biting noise, concord, a tattle, leery. It used to be easier. Is this your only rhythm? Where did you pick this up? It's not really what you meant to dig up in the corner of a page. Oh, those visitors, looking glass. In place of herons, my hand jumps 3 words. Make me stop without a quiver, recalling arrows for a shakeout, a story at the edge of deadlock, on second thought recoil. Never enough nerve to send foundlings back where they belong among residual tides. What's next but care for quiet, a repositioning of moons at torrents? May I tip my hat, overturn what can no longer welcome daylight, but gesture toward unprovoked sonority. If these tines represent distinctions, what do they lean against to bind traceless tracts, unsuitable for landing across the sound? No urgent shuttling of feathers, already tardy. Why must these words overwhelm an alphabet's antecedents with questions reserved only for later impasse, collapsed about fledgling lyrics, orbiting oceans, bearing less weight than precedent or 10 spots? No logic follows herons, wing for wing, too smooth to enable any course but flight for a moment. Pauses in momentum, count on breath for height, despite a relentless pall of soil to round out all claims about a heron's measure of impatience, suddenly devastating in its reach. Few coded words bind numbers, lacking thirds, or flaunt poses turned out barely fit to mold keys falling outside of clocks. Isn't language grand when it comes to subtle scores, punctuated as it were with vestiges of glottal stops? Such a compressed turn for the clearing of a throat obsessed solely with extremity of scorn. Who was that fumbling at the outset of folds, circling necks, with a ruffling of laces? Hold on, there's a story in the tale, not above taking a knock on the knees after making much of noise, crowing over how to get from here to there. In plain talk, without employing modes to signal unregistered arrivals. You ask what's the point of boxes in telling what clause next to make itself extant, even face to face, when all that counts is extrusion on top of sticky digits. Calm, calm. Where's the lie ferrying just the movement no one dares to stop talking about? How long can the scramble clatter on? No word hazards face. And stop, notation, tracking merest sweetness of disposition into unread ledgers short on foreign aid. Okay, this one's called A Retinue of Scandals. A retinue of scandals commends a voice to tender distance. Ridges recall a sense of parsing questions, only to regret scratching after answers. What have hedges told you, just to convey you never really listen after thorns batten twigs against boundaries? How can memory of toil neglect a day's warrant for awarding distemper and rise to nourish portents riddled with dismissal following harvests, where every crop fails close to acres? Must branches then twist reapers into associations better left unspoken, as if tap roots rely on scourging wakes into islands, disturbing news for ward healers bent on gain among silos? Won't subcontractors arise after defying symbioses of reversal, as outlanders strike no measure from neglect of forests, after straightened heirlooms, each solo slough berries from quick thorns, unlikely to allay a child's after-school boredom, while woodwinds harden nearby? Instrument brokers urgent to levy taxes on lone trees churn instead of mitering earnings into oboes. Antechamber. When will attending nurses call me of all people? I wish I could do without the attention. The staff will take my bloods to let me know if someone new has thrown me off my stride. At my age, a pinch is not what worries me most. Fraught moments waiting in a waiting room. Aren't pauses rich? Are remedies final? Or one-off recourses thorough merely in their asperity? May I not complain so much as to kick buckets less droll than needles into caretakers, ascendant yet shy, to greet non-ambulatory patients as little other than vehicles of extremity, all but gone. Uh, 5:02 a.m. Pale guests wonder if night's dream keys, the better to turn faces in on darkness among crowds sequestered overnight. Sing-song griefs and haberdashery feather uncertain steps into spinning dances, never fall down. But who lures pros to quibble, and who then grants shy regard, will not have come to stay for morning, neither shame nor long-delayed reliance on offhand distraction will convey the pointedness of unalloyed absence maintained without a shudder, nor a nod toward disdain, still less reprehension. To call unclaimed tangles out, how can insiders alone settles what's left to unscramble? If viral currents then steer winsome, even angular displacements of prisms, frail lights break color when clairvoyant edges thinly concede only a cold breath of distinction, as after you and I hazard unleveled streets staggered with corners. 10/5/2025. One breath, one climb, one page, no idea when words will end, where blame will settle its grudge, a confirmed disdain for passing sentence over condemnations. Oh God, how I hate those distracting nouns, full of hidden judgment. Who must I reconsider as dear ones, all but departed? Why did Caitlin run out of her hallway just as soon as her guests stopped speaking? No business of mine nor yours. Still her haste compels release of terms for lost possibilities, as in abject mythologies guarded by demons with unpronounceable names for mountains and whirlpools. No door to the river, whose fingers deliver handles for breathing underwater. Where currents fail, others resign themselves to speaking in ripples, hazarding wet questions, liquid with desire. Which minerals turn streams to fire? No heed for punctuation. Vessels adrift beside dawdling grievances. Raw facility for staying afloat. In flames no warrant for privilege among the wordless. Sheer breath ignites only worrisome rivers, where those without doorways, abandoned, awaiting keys, anticipate renewed reversals of dialect, abrupt and guttural, blunted with recapitulation. How have bloated idioms deferred a steely postponement of release? And which belated referrals prevent strident Argonauts from drowning alone, after tears, after dank marshes withhold depth from nested tributaries reclaimed only by tragedies more vagrant than goats? Under which whirlpool will the last rapids churn take shape, a bent through murk of not between orders, if not between, under which whirlpool will the last rapids churn take shape, a bent through murk, if not between cinders? Must riggers drag night trawlers through shallows, reworking tedium into a sheltering reef, stripped cartilage, ragged with fires, and if not by hinges, how? I don't know how much time, I don't have a watch tonight. The last one here is short, and I have a few others after it if you would like. Okay, this one's got a... Okay. Do you want to hear this last one? Yes. Okay. It's nastier than the others. Here and now, I defame the blocks I pretend to live on. The bricks they shoulder shelter no one living without pests. But a vagabond's poems stand briefly enough to treasure. But a vagabond's poems stand briefly enough to treasure, though not ensuring pips for retirement. Poet taster, by gods I curse you and your murmuring eyes, but by so much more your streets, your skies. I curl my tongue, spewing lies. Many others have already spat against walls, stairways, doors. It's not the best way to end.
Give it up for Marc Salomon. Woo! Thank you, Marc. That was so beautiful. Okay, we have like no breaks between readings, so we just have to go on. And I will now introduce Terrence. So here we go. So I'll read your bio, and I'll also read Gérard de Nerval's bio. So I have two bios. Okay. So Terrence Arjoon is the author of The Disinherited. That's over there for sale at the table. An Acid Splash, or into blue caves. He is a poet, editor, and critic whose work can be found in Amulet, Tagwerk, the Poetry Project newsletter, and Smooth Friend, among other publications. He is an editor at 1080 Press and manages 192 books. And Gérard de Nerval is a pioneering French Romantic poet, translator, and novelist, known for blending dream, memory, and mysticism. A key precursor to symbolism and surrealism, he explored the boundary between sanity and madness in works like Aurélia and Sylvie. And I added this detail for my son Luca, who's over there, diligently working on his Legos. De Nerval was known for walking a pet lobster named Thibaut on a blue silk ribbon leash. Lobsters are peaceful, serious, and don't bark, he said. Okay. Reading The Disinherited, a loose translation that blends Gérard de Nerval's poems with Terrence's own work, I find myself fighting the impulse to know who wrote what. I'm not particularly proud of my desire to allocate authorship or of my compulsive urge to differentiate between original work and translation, since the book's entire project is precisely to undermine these literary hierarchies, cracking open instead a sequence from source to target language into a transhistorical relocation of meaning. My desire to tell apart what Terrence renders inseparable goes against the very ethos of the book, a meshwork that happens not only on the level of structure, but also through imagery and syntax. Quote, "We enlaced the world back then in jasmine memories," end of quote. The Disinherited is in fact closer to a collaboration than a translation, a collusion, even conspiracy, whereby both Terrence and de Nerval meet to de-singularize each other's voices. Terrence turns de Nerval's black, melancholic sun brown and metabolic. Fairies become scorpions, a sight, a soup. Taking up de Nerval's future legacy, Terrence returns to him the surrealist imagery he had only begun forecasting. But the logic also works the other way round. De Nerval estranges Terrence from himself. And although published in 2026, reading The Disinherited propels us into a historical twilight zone, a foggy walk between centuries, decades, even days, where light and darkness laced retain their pre-symbolic density. This is why Terrence can write lines like, quote, "When I'm in bed sometimes, I notice the parts of my body covered by clothes that are those of a leopard's. Consider genitals as ablative precursor of sound." The collision I'm most drawn to, however, is geographic. It has to do with place and how we define home. De Nerval's eccentricity, his fascination with non-Western landscapes, converge with a 21st century diasporic subject, a subject alienated by the very displacements that Orientalism first helped produce. De Nerval and Arjoon meet in the negation of the prefix, the disinherited, the displaced, their alienations incompatible, their estrangements opposed, yet both moving within the same historical fog. Quote, I like everyone, am lost in the wilderness of the century, end of quote. As the century further overdetermines our language by mining our words for data, the Disinherited invites us to reach towards the dead, not for advice, but for collaboration. Not towards the dead, but towards those like de Nerval who remain, thanks to the work of poets like Terrence, permanently unengraved. Please join me in welcoming Terrence Arjoon.
Okay. Amazing, thank you. Now I'm going to read poems not in that book. This is one I've been excited about, L'Imprimerie de Mickey. 1. You meet enough people in the desert, it gets to be old hat. Not all by definition a community of lovers, but united by the blackness of the sky and the dense crunch of the chaparral. Bach hour in the northern hemisphere unseats us all under the far thigh of distant lightning and draped Christmases, some cinnamon lip gloss or aquaphor, or again later, slipping myself a Mickey far away from the storm. As for now, the rain, the real rain, it shatters us all, and the mud tracks up the narrow staircase at Tübingen. Tomorrow, when the well eventually overflows, it's quiet in the print shop. That delirious streak of mud casts shadows past yonder cow patch. The overhead lights obliterate my shadow. My dream of the offset motor drowned in Suma-E ink and trucks backing up, and most importantly, not being there. If I could have done more through my absence, I would have, but the Taconic is painted Reinhardt black, and the Turnpike too. But let us turn again to January, that in the garden with fair Minnie we singeth full merrier than the popinjay, and bizarrely the crags of the mountain break in madder and ochre, pottery shards and shell casings, big turds and small, as the poles just sit there, dull, Pluto iridescent in the shit gray morn. Later, tired of fetching water by the pail, we build gingerbread houses, or have lunch, or light the lights with Clarabelle, as they all count the books again, or hide them under the counter. We learn if everything was different, everything would have been different, except for the harshness of the lights. Although years later in the hollows of the land the goofy bells ring, meanwhile from page to page they buy things. The pain of postcards is a solid lump, like the Bay Bridge, and empty underneath, as Alice is rattled by the rats. 2. Dancing over the click track past Clancy's, everything coated in a fine layer of dust. The swamp air, the glottal river, but if it's okay with the carnival kid. But no, who knows what's okay with the carnival kid? That silly symphony beaming out the rental, crumpled cyanotopes, unset letters, worn out ink pads, and so we therefore bivouac by Araby. And isn't it strange how I open every door, even when there are none? When the light eventually came in, how little we thought of the carnival kid, of what he did and where he did it, and who he spoke to and what came of it. But that's how storms work. They finish brewing and then the sky stays black. Then the doors open again and the letters go flying, way past Bioscleve, way past wells and pools, past Neptune, through the mirror and everything. We hide in the wastebasket and douse the cards in ink. Not past the symbols, but this whole scene leads to roadside pie and obviated galoshes. 3. Looking at dawn, looking at dusk, the look of the penniless daisies after dinner, duck, cherries, and gâteau. Swollen from the graveyard of reproduction, glinting off Murano candies and the stirrups in the foreman's apartment. If I had known more, I wouldn't have gone further, but everyone on the boat and the people on the boat didn't make it easy. Pete dimmed the lights. Every winter, the light seeps deeper into the violet cracks of the cement, so I am laying flat in the steam shovel. The stars are stars still, unfortunately. I fell through the blueprint. I fell over the anvil, and I fell over the foreman. I fell over the hammer. But everyone back then had inside them a plank and a screw and a wheelbarrow or two. Everyone was harried by the loggers and the wind moving at the edges of the cement mixer. 4. Horace's horse collar. You know, you can wake and the rod will still be rooted in the earth and the beans in the fridge still. In the video, the silhouettes of the 5 men standing in the mud amidst geometries alone found on all pottery. Earlier, in the astronomer's dream, you said, it comes out of me like a tree and there is wind today. But it's late today, and the wind is even louder than before. I see now why we all stuffed our ears at the clubhouse. Maybe his footfalls drummed deep still into the earth. Maybe that engine thud is his tuning. I go out in the night and I am telling you this dream. I was on the staircase, coming to you from Condessa, where spotlights and sweet music filled the air. Mickey played lute to me as I washed up, gravel from the road bouncing off the hardwood as white dust flew through the entire world, and I heard Mickey, but saw only mud upon my body as he played his instrument to me. The bathroom gave admittance to all sort of quadrupeds and loved ones, Horace, holding vases with lozenges and snakes in relief. His breath grew warm and smelled of seaweed, and then I recalled the dreamer's clothes and Horace's pajamas. We smile in the elevator, but the spotlights have a surreal effect. Nobody knows how rolling in the field creates a sexuality unto itself. The rest of us left in the shadows as Horace is stuck at the entrance and the rods rooted even deeper in the earth. Tiger songs. I'm kind of in love with Mickey Mouse. I didn't realize. Tiger songs. 1. They loved these tigers. They actively sought these tigers out. They loved the concept of printing as nightfall. The A.B. Dick is a tiger. I cannot hear myself while it thinks. I actively do not scrape gunk from the printer's eaves. I make face and stand on chair to make face in elevated phone neural substantiation. I have a brother in the Earth Movers Project. I feel him, blue skin, milk stealing in the tiger's yawn. 2. All the pages lapsing and locking by the evening in locked white light historiolas. It's cinema if branded striping vertical, poetry is striped lateral. Address the question of going. Stars outside Charlotte's room in the early morning ease up the lettuce rest. 3. It had always been trees that made the tigers sing. Sung arrows sparkling, arrows shoot out of the blue bogs where the tiger sleeps. It had always been the trees in Galilee. It had always been bomb-thrusted gorse. It had always been the horse-out sitter-reel that shot the breeze from a pit mount. 4. I adjure you by your power to let the baby sleep. Tigers grow from trees when the baby sleeps, not bombed and not rolling gorse, not arrow-filled or lateral motion, not stealing milk. I remain still from inside sackcloth and ashes, but a love tripwire rotated Audrey brethren. 5. The shelled peas heaped bucks across the Arctic bright fen. Whatever is woven in you by the tigers, neither warp is alga, nor woof is NATO shells or combed musk. It is derelict sackcloth from the offset huskers shown up on the marbled rooftops. 6. I want to stand still in the sackcloth bog. Vlad responds to the first draft of this poem. I wanted to be doing something, standing still. He says, let's not know where these tigers are and stand still. The motor replaces not stand still. Send the pick to the shelled place, slumped standing tiger watch. 7. Experts are confused by the wheatgrass parapet, by his last play, a death threat with orchestra. When rising in Uranian cloud cover now get to the points and procedures of paper grain, disembodied grain stripe is all. Ah, but here is the enclosure where we used to pick roadside berries, all of us, remember? 8. Can stones be very far behind? Floated alga melt bonds from mohawk krill, ink on the blue rag again, aeolian dusk revoir. But a tiger is filled with unlettered bluebells. I had a cold like 3 months ago. In Lovely Blue, Part 1, as seen through a telescope. My brother had had bad dreams lately because a tiger was brought in unsafely into the room where my father slept, whose myriad dreams of his father's altar lamps, of burning incense, of forgotten courtyards, of my years of coming home late, fill the dog-swept air. In his dreams, I translate Friedrich Holderlin's In Lovely Blue. In lovely blue flowers, the metal church tower. As seen through a telescope, the hammered sheet metal of the belfry blinds all oculi. The cry of the swallows, a most touching blue. When I wake, out of fear or constipation, I piss in the outhouse. The sun goes up over it and colors the sheets. My mother finds me under the pear tree. I had had bad dreams since the tiger was here, brought in unsafely. On the stone bench the tiger sits, beautiful. The windows, same, bell-like, gates of beauty. Namely because gates are real, actual gates, and they're like forest trees. I fell, the tree fells. I meet the dog and loan him a book. His vision is failing. Crystal reading glasses, dropped calls, mucus, ivy dripping from the belfry. But why would he be in the belfry? If someone in the belfry goes downstairs, it's quiet. Going to return a book and leave the library. Part 2, bell passing through a soap bubble. The flat letters still, above all not circulated per se, but discarded. Why we weave errors into rugs. With tiger blood, you fill up father's water barrel. With plantains, wash his hands. He ventures into the courtyard at night, running his hands along the wall to piss under the pear tree. During the day he sleeps, the image stays flat. When Rachel read my Holderlin translation 4 years ago, she wrote me, "Now I will have to write the death song. I will not write an essay." May is when sheer. So that letter, that tactility, becomes filled with dead dogs or a postcard. May is when sheer effort and life. The ribbon carrier gunked with pear juice and Apulian grain. My father wakes as pears rain down in the courtyard. Sharp cries from the belfry. This is what I think instead. It's great. Reflections curve, the shadow of the night cranes with stars. I stole everything. Even this very poem, its form is borrowed from Vlad. When I say it like that, I heave up a new image. Charlotte writes me on butcher paper, so I write her on newsprint and finish half before falling asleep. On newsprint, even flowers look beautiful because they bloom under the sun. Okay. Low tide. Once I fled paradise and tried to be beautiful. When I left, I laughed loudly so that people in the world might hear me as I live on the far side of the river. For a while, I wrote down the name of every living thing I saw. I read the rocks and their panegyrics. I read the crickets, the dirt, snakeskins, crystal texts boned and deloused. Pick up that flower from the table. What is it? Wisteria, lupine, you don't know. There is in me now a worm-like moment. This movement makes me sweat, painting clouds into the coral beneath my feet. This fossil reveals small flowers when lifted, breath swollen from a long night on my own, a fractured graze of light which renders ultimately as more martinis. The astronomer ordered one dirty, or he was from Terlingua, but we agree that there is no right time for the clock to stop, only that it just happens. Okay. The astronomer's dream. He stuck me at the glam rock party, the astronomer, eyes glittering, drunk off brandy Alexander's. I woke up with a warm knife in my belly. Not a very tasty drink, brandy Alexander's, I think. I woke up with a warm knife in my belly, worried, and I cried all night wondering so. I summoned something. I was a bathing beauty at the estate, fingers stuck up in me like a spindle, a syzygy of delight. I think of pink Venus. She is making me feel things. Because back then I wanted to be a dancer. Eye bags, skin picking and tremulous, locking that nervous shake into form. Dancing with 8-bog and swamp water, she leads down to kiss a red oyster. I kiss a blue potato. She hates that because I was on point. Something answering a voice in silver or far thigh. Moving eastward, the river was frozen solid, so we swung pickaxes in the night out through me and extending from twigs and branches into the nearby towns. One half of the valley is making love to the other. She leaves me at the river's edge. I can smell mint, cinnamon, teeth. Sleep comes like a burst testament or a faulty citation. It comes out of me like a tree. And there is wind today, my friend. though you yell into canyons parading beside them as if feelings were felt or worse, found. So, you adopt a new name, and so do I, but you got seawater in your mouth and it made you nauseous. When you spit it up, everything's up. Cornerstones, acorn caps, the blood and electric shock of the last 1,000 years breaking like a mosaic. I too am troubled by the lassos, and I am always thinking I should get flowers too late. Being trapped in this lateness, and so late to it, bells demarcate the boundaries of my body. When words fall shapeless like an almond, space grows quiet. I am struck by the pale straw color of that rock. So reaching an appendage, a dogwood, I stole a sparrow to send this to you. Carnal whiffs surrounding wheels binding the sky. The sun craves his posture, a house appears, and a complex of tensions within it. This earth, this passage, after Isamu Noguchi. In the city to build this city, whose terraces are the color of stars, roundness to be departed from, blown green in the wind. This earth is the name of my belly, full of pear juice and cherry compote, skin daubed, fingerprints from my love to cover my body. Round this passage, this earth, to bring her back to me, to cover me once again. Butterflies and charlotte sparrows and mint, and nothing appears more likely than a return somewhere on the other side of this century to that city whose aqueducts poured Cafe Corretto down the avenues of this earth, muddy, almost browned, languorous. But now nothing looks less likely, the green light limned in the basalt passages of my life. The Secret of Nerval. I never slept for a long time. Too many people were talking. In Cairo, in Todi, on the train, the Cinnabar Kid, drones, 8 Bog Marie, blue frogs, orally, Nerval, pottery shards, mineral springs, Isis, Charlotte, scorpions, lamps, and I wrote through silence, all my notebooks left blank. The mistletoe bough. Laughing in a ditch next to the astronomer because I tricked him into adopting a mistletoe. Clouds pass over and under and through it, and there is a jasmine shrub, which come spring I would weave around my head, telling stories and talking forever, only a stone's throw away from the beginning of cinema. When a small chest and an attic, the rocks turned and hid their faces. When an ocean of light, or planetary body, or fibrous green leaf, the stars behind me grow brighter. When that leaf, yet to receive a name, no leopard shall discover my body. No printer can dispose of me, who is only a wreath, and who kept watch on this orchard, whose stars blessed his eating of peach pits and fiery pomegranate bodies. I should read one of the translations. I've been avoiding that. Or I've only been reading translations. El Desdichado. I am a shadow, a fool, an inconsolable aqueduct prince in my metabolic tower. My tired soul, my moth constellation, it carries my brown melancholic sun. Dancing nights in tombs you consoled me, giving me pursed lips in Populonia, the flower that pleased my tainted heart, and the trellis where the vine and the wisteria agreed. Am I Nerval or Villon, Harris or Rodney? My face is red again from kisses. Invisible hearts. I dreamed in the cave where the mermaid swims, and twice I crossed the Tigris, phasing in and out on Orpheus's lyre of the soup of saints and the cries of scorpions. Okay, I'm going to read a few more from the book. Telomere oubliette. I bury my sickness at sea, and when I do so, my life splits open like the stern of a ship. The sea that we have is what's left, and they designated this cairn a misfortune column to commemorate the dead baker and his trees. At this column, we split off and head south through the firs, smoke guiding the way. It went more smoothly than we thought, but now I wish I had a million hands like my mother in beaming light emissions. Okay. The Secret of Nerval. The painter took me onward to a place where the streets became narrower and more gloomy. We came upon a house at the end of a series of houses, and in that house a room near the end of a hallway, past genocides and heroin deals that fill the whole horizon, past wainscoting and holy basil, past scanty clumps of date palms, past madness and rivers and rotten teeth and catacombs and white cubes and marionettes, past redemption. In this delightful place, whose exquisitely carved windows look out over the Kalish, I lost my European hair. I'm going to read one more. Okay. Reverse stupa. You get on a plane and stop going outside, so the draftman reneges on his contract. The deep, squash color of my doubts, violet and rings, color of grapes, mirror of my doubts. But earlier, when they failed to find a hill or a mountain, the forest did just fine. The magnolia flowers float back upwards, annoyingly glistening with rain, and the beetles fly back in to the real world, not just fever projected from my bedroom, or nightlight glowing, or sea violet dark with hesitation. In the real world, the world destroys us, and the oval entryway flattens into the ground, trusting the rolling sea, clear of mind, violet-colored clarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Terrence. That was such a beautiful way of ending the reading. Thank you so much, Marc, also for your beautiful reading. Thank you, all of you, for coming. I also want to thank the Poetry Project staff, Kay, Anna, Will, Heather, as well as James, and Serene, and all of our volunteers. Come back to the Poetry Project. I hope to see you soon again. Thank you.